Rodney Hood flips it back to Gordon. Gordon goes in the post to Gobert. He spins on Hollins, comes up the reverse side, and jams it.
Oh, boy.
And the Kings announcers wonder, who is Rudy Gobert?
Who is Rudy Gobert? How good could he be? What did we see last night in the third? We'll talk about all that. Plus, is Blake Griffin the MVP of the NBA right now? Last night's performance was pretty unreal. It's all coming up on today's edition of Tip-Off. Bop, 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 pow. How are you? Good morning. Welcome. Hope you're good. Cheers. Some morning cup of coffee or whatever you do, or whenever you may be listening to the program. I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA Insider. Today is a brand new Kenyan. It's quite fabulous. It's very smooth. About as good a coffee as I've ever had, actually. Should be, because it was very expensive. And it's really that good, so I'm fired up. Jazz fall last night, 9th in a row, first time they've had a 9-game losing streak since March of 2005, when Baggy Haggleton was our starting center, along with Raja Bell, Keith McLeod, Andre Karolinko, and who was our starting power forward that night? Don't remember. Matt Harpring came off the bench to play 38 minutes in that game. Mehmet Okur came off the bench as well. You know what? We're better off than we were on that day, and it all turned out all right after that, because the Darren and Carlos era followed shortly after Carlos was hurt and the draft pick got us Darren. So we'll see. If you're new to the program, you can follow us on Twitter at LockedOnSports. Our Facebook is Locked On Sports and David Locke. I'm going to try to up the Facebook David Locke game, though I don't think any of you really care about my general daily life, but every now and then I'll share it with you. You also, the Google Plus community is good and strong. So all good for you along the various social networking. Appreciate you following, and if you could take a second and give us a positive review on this, we'd like it very much. What we do is we open up with the NBA 5 minutes of NBA news, and then we dig deep on the Utah Jazz, and our dig deep today will involve a lot of information on one Rudy Gobert. But in the meantime, let us do the NBA 5.
This is Steve Novak, and you are Locked On Jazz.
Hey, Steve Novak sighting! Atlanta, another blowout win last night. Scoring 108 on Indiana is pretty impressive. Mike Budenholzer has that offense clicked in, and what's interesting is when we saw them earlier, Al Horford was awful, and he had 25 last night. Looks a bit better. I watched some of that game before ours. But then I got sucked in by that amazing Washington-Boston game. Marcus Smart arrived, by the way, had 23 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists. The story of that game will be the emotional reaction by John Wall afterwards. But also John Wall, I mean, that was just an amazing game. Double overtime, back and forth late, lots of different aspects to it. Boston, who has not been able to hold leads all year, they've lost 5 games and they're led by as many as 15, just about lost to 6 the other night. We're fighting tough and fighting back in this one rather than losing a lead. Evan Turner made a bunch of big shots. That was a really interesting game, and really, actually, to me, one of those subtle games. Washington just finds a way to win it, right? They somehow just get out of double overtime with a win, and that's what good teams do. There aren't many good teams in the East. Washington, Toronto, Atlanta, Cleveland, Chicago are the 5. I think I only said 4, but there's a 5th in there. There's 5 good teams in the East. Cleveland's going to win it. Chicago, Toronto, Washington, Atlanta. There's 5 teams that are pretty good in the Eastern Conference, and everybody else is dog meat. Andrew Wiggins got going last night, 21, 6, and 4. They're not very good, so he's going to continue to get real opportunities. And we watched last night, Ron and I watched the Spurs against the Timberwolves on the plane back last night. That's why there's no Empty the Noggins, because we went right to work on that. I'll try to get Empty the Noggin later. But the Wiggins looked in that game, not last night's, just had incredible burst. All the skills are there. Interesting piece yesterday by Kevin Pelton on Cleveland, how their defense is clicking in. They're going to win the East, guys. They're the most talented team in the East. They'll probably have a battle with Toronto or Washington if they do this right and avoid Chicago somewhere along the way. But I don't see that not working. I know we looked at it, and I kind of didn't believe it for a while, but if they're beginning to play enough defense, they have enough firepower offensively that they're going to be awfully tough to beat in there. You know, we had a big discussion about the 5 best players in the NBA with Spence and Britton on the pregame show. And obviously it's LeBron and Durant are two. And then I started the year with Blake, Chris Paul, and Joakim Noah, and I thought the Clippers could come out of the West because they had two of the top five. Well, then Anthony Davis became part of the question. Then Steph Curry became part of the question. Spence is taking Steph Curry over Chris Paul at this point, I think, if I have it correctly. I'm not willing to go there yet, and I'm still going to keep Blake in there. I think he's the MVP of the league. He's averaging 24 points, 8 rebounds, and 4 assists. And the 4 assists are the number that, to me, is the number that I think keeps getting forgotten in all these discussions. You've got to have big men that can pass. I mean, it's a problem for us and the Utah Jazz. But you go look at the best teams in the NBA. They have big men that can – offensive teams in the league. Almost all of them have big men that can pass the basketball. And, the Clippers are, on one level, they're 6th in the West. On the other level, they're 15-5. So they've completely clicked in. And I start to look at the MVP. I don't think somebody on Toronto, if I had to pick the MVP at the quarter poll, Toronto, Atlanta, Washington are the top 3 teams, with Cleveland at 4 and Chicago at 5. I'm not sure there's a guy on any of those teams. Kyle Lowry, I guess, gets some discussion. And then the Warriors, you got Steph Curry. The Rockets, maybe James Harden should be a part of this conversation. Portland 16-4. Memphis, Marcus Gasol deserves to be part of the conversation. Spurs don't have that individual, and then you get to Blake. Pretty hard to argue. 24-8-5. Last few games he's been a little bit better. It's interesting. I mean, I think Steph obviously is the guy most people are talking about, right? If you had to pick an MVP it's an interesting idea, the MVP at this quarter poll. I actually kind of love it. I mean, they give away Conference Player of the Month, so it's kind of thing. But I actually would like I always think that's kind of a weird. I guess you're giving away you're giving January. You're giving 5 months away, so I'm stretching it out a little bit more. This would be, but it's. I mean, Steph's great. Steph's amazing right now. I guess I just got to wrap my head around the idea of him as an MVP. 23 points, 8 assists, 5 rebounds. 5 rebounds, incredible. 2 steals. Hate numbers to do it all, but that's pretty awesome. It's an interesting argument. It's going to be, if Durant or LeBron doesn't run away with this, it's going to get pretty interesting. And Anthony Davis's numbers are the best, but he can't be the MVP. He just can't be. Unless, they're not even 500. And it's worth discussing what a limited impact he's having on games defensively. Not that there's anything wrong with it. It's an age thing. It's an experience thing. He hasn't figured out how to impact it. Maybe defensive systematically they're not as good as they need to be. I don't know. But New Orleans allows, I think, the most amount of restricted area points in the league, and Anthony Davis is on a team. Like, how can that be? Blake was sick last night. 45 points, and that step-back 3 to win it was just absurd. That's what an MVP does. A guy who can drop, Steph can do that, 45. You gotta be one of those guys. One of those unique guys that can go drop just insane numbers on a given night. That is our NBA 5.
Hey, this is Gordon Hayward. I want to hear from you. Call 801-200-3738 and ask me a question. That's 801-200-3738 to ask me a question.
Thank you very much, G. And please do that. I'm going to actually go through those today and get those done and try to grab some stuff from the players today and move forward on that. So, or questions for Ron Boone, 801-200-3738. Home games are taking questions for Ron. Road games, we're highlighting great Jazz fans is the plan. 801-200-3738. 801-200-3738. Same storyline, right? Better storyline last night. They were a little shorthanded without DeMarcus, but we didn't fall behind by 17. That was the first time in 10 games we didn't fall behind by 17. But it's the same story. It's a dreadful second quarter followed by a great third quarter. This time was a little different with Rudy Gobert in the middle of it. It's the same story that without Gordon Hayward on the floor, we really struggled to score. Plus minus last night's bizarre. Gordon, who I didn't think was great last night, frankly. 1 of 7 from 3. Jazz were 3 of 17. This is just, I think, a mentally fatigued, physically tired team. Remember that for Coach Snyder and the organization, a really good practice day is probably more important than an individual game performance. And so he's driving them hard, and there's a leg weariness that may be going on. There were a lot of front rims yesterday. We haven't played an excessive amount of games recently, and we haven't traveled a lot, but I just think we're at that point of the season where you've got a lot of games in there, and that's just, I think that's, you're not going to come out, they're not going to come out and say it, hey, you know what, we'd rather have a good practice than a good game, but I think there's something to it, and Quinn certainly runs a fabulous practice, and these guys are improving a good deal. It's just hard to see, but Hayward last night, it's interesting, think about what we're asking Gordon. Rod and I were on him a little bit in the broadcast last night. Felt like he didn't have a great game. He went 6 of 16 shooting. He finished with 19 points. While he's on the floor, we were +9. In the 11 minutes he was on the bench, we were -18 last night. There is just not another player on this team that does any of the things that Gordon does. Alec is not able to take that whole idea that Alec's the second team scorer with a bench unit. It's just not there. It's not Trey's not able to do it. Maybe you start pounding in the post Ennis and playing a very contrary game to what what Quinn wants to play, but then you're getting outside of who you are and what you want to do. It's a very complicated concept right now on how you survive. I mean, Gordon, and you don't want Gordon playing much more than 36 minutes a night. But last night, Gordon has a decent night. He has 19 points, 4 rebounds, 7 assists, 4 steals. Pretty hard to quibble, but 1 of 7 from 3, and what we really needed out of him last night was we needed him to have 28. We needed him to bury 3 more threes, go 4 of 7 from 3, and suddenly have 28 points, shoot 9 of 16, and be out of this world. And that's what and then we would have had a chance to win. Where this team is right now, that's what it takes. That's what it was going to take last night. Was Gordon was going to have to be extraordinary special, and for us to have a chance to win against Sacramento without DeMarcus Cousins. And that's what you're asking out of him. We're asking enormous things out of Gordon, not just. That's because I felt like, man, Gordon just didn't have a good game, let us down. And 6 of 16 is not great. And 1 of 7 is not great either. But he also did lead the team in assists, lead the team in steals, lead the team in scoring, lead the team in plus-minus. And I want a lot more than I got last night, which to me, and that's because those 7 threes were open. We're 3 of 17 from 3. I think if we took a second, we could do it here later in the program and watch the 17 threes. They're open. At some point, this league is a make or miss league, and it's a cliche. And unfortunately, Mark Jackson says it a lot, so then you don't want to use it. But it's true, and that's also, I hate to be totally blunt, that also might just be a talent thing. Like some of it's playing. You're playing with better players. You got better guys around you, more comfortable, your system's better, you feel better, you are more relaxed, you make your shots. We're still in a process where Quinn's got these guys learning a tremendous amount, so we're still thinking. And eventually this stuff becomes instinctive. And then you're playing with a little bit more freedom than what you've done before, and then you play a little bit better. That's part of what's going on. But last night, uncontested jumpers. Uncontested. 13 of 38 shooting. Come on. 34%. They're 14 of 30, 47%. That's the game. I don't know. If you're a head coach and I'm looking at that, I don't know what I do. Right? Trey Burke, 1 of 6 on uncontested Jays last night. This is an important little stretch here for actually, I guess it's half done, but Darren Collison and Corey Joseph on back-to-back nights. You got to play with these guys. You got to. It's one thing if you're a second-year player in the NBA and you're getting blasted by Kyle Lowry and Russell Westbrook and Chris Paul and John Wall in Washington on the 14th. But when we're playing, Corey, Darren Collison, this is a stretch where Trey's got to play well. Frankly, he shouldn't get manhandled the way he did by Victor Oladipo. Then he's got Darren Collison. Then he's got Corey Joseph because Tony Parker's not coming and Patty Mills is out. Then Miami's got Norris Cole. You got to play with it. John Wall. All right, John Wall kicks your butt. Then John Wall kicks your butt. New Orleans is Drew Holiday. He's just bigger. And Norris Cole again, then Victor Oladipo again, then Kemba Walker. Like, Trey's got to get rolling a little bit and show that he's not at a disadvantage every night, or else, frankly, you can start doing the math and he becomes the 30th point guard in the NBA of starting point guards. It's not that bad, but that's at some point Darren Collison's about the 27th. I might be exaggerating, but I'd have to look at it. I don't think there's many guys lower on the totem pole than Darren Collison, and I'm not sure who I thought got the best of that matchup last night. Well, I think I actually do know. So yeah, you gotta buck up a little bit on that one. All right, let's talk. The story of the night was Rudy Gobert. By the way, starters were +1 last night again. It's every night. Young team without veteran depth. This is kind of going to be who we are. Young team without veteran depth. Starters hang, go to the bench. Woo! Okay, so eventually we do what Orlando's done. What did Orlando do this year? Willie Green, Channing Frye, Ben Gordon. They're not sexy, but they've played. They know how to play. And what happens? I think Orlando's going to make the playoffs. Sacramento's done with their rebuilding thing. So they add the Reggie Evans of the world and those kind of guys onto their roster. And Ramon Sessions is their backup point guard. Okay? Guys who've been in the league for 7. Carl Landry. That's a team trying to win. We're trying to develop. We're in a process. Washington had their young guys, and Kevin Serafin is one of their young guys who became a good bench player, but then they surrounded him with Nene and Emeka Okafor, which became Martin Gortat, and veteran guys. Paul Pierce now. We'll get there. That's what the process is. We got to figure out which of our puzzle pieces go where, though. And one of our puzzle pieces is looking better and better by the day, and that's Rudy Gobert. Now, last night, when Rudy Gobert was on the floor, Sacramento, now, no DeMarcus Cousins. So what would have happened if DeMarcus Cousins had tried to bogart and overpower Rudy Gobert? Don't know. Good question, though. Last night, opponent shot 12 of 37 when Gobert was on the floor. 12 of 37 for 32.4% when Gobert was on the floor. He's an incredibly impactful player. He might be our third best player on the sense of impact on the floor. Cantor probably is our third best player, but there's an argument that Gobert at times could be our third best player simply because of impact on the floor. Now, the problem is the other side still. And I'll give you a bunch of numbers on this. Last night, when Gobert's on the floor, 12 of 37, we shoot 32%. Okay, we still haven't figured out how to score very well when Rudy's on the floor. Rudy's still learning where to space, how to do things. There's at least once a practice, Quinn's like, hey, you're blocking stuff right there. He hasn't got that yet. Okay. That's part of this. Okay, little victories. I almost feel like I should do a part of the show to keep you guys sane called Little Victories. Because that's what we're getting. We're not getting scoreboard victories this year. We're getting little victories. It's part of the process, part of the progress. So listen to some of these numbers on Rudy. This is really exciting. When Rudy Gobert is on the floor, our defensive rating is 101.4. Okay, you can't always have Rudy Gobert on the floor. But if Rudy Gobert were a team, right, where would 101.4 put us defensively? 101.4 would rank us defensively with if we could have, if Rudy played 48 minutes, instead of the 27th ranked defensive, 28th ranked defensive team, 101.4 would put us at 8th in the NBA defensively. Warriors, Rockets, Spurs, Wizards, Grizzlies, Blazers, Thunder, Jazz. And again, you got to have these guys. The Warriors have Bogut. The Rockets have Howard. It stunningly hasn't played a lot, and they're still good defensively. Spurs have Duncan. Wizards have Gortat. Grizzlies have Gasol. Blazers have Lopez-Kaman combo. Thunder have a great defensive system, but they have Ibaka and Perkins. Bucks are the next best defensive team, and they've got Larry Sanders. Then you get into Roy Hibbert, Joakim Noah, DeAndre Jordans. Alex Len for Phoenix is helping. The mystery in here is Atlanta. How the heck is Atlanta doing this? Not sure. Atlanta's a real mystery to me right now. Houston and Atlanta, the two teams that have me scratching my head. Okay, so our defensive rating when Gobert is on the floor is a 101.4. Teams shoot 43% when he's on the floor. Per 48 minutes, we're allowing 93 points a game when Gobert's on the floor. 101, 43, 93. When he's off the floor, this is where the problems arise. We allow 114 points per 100 possessions. So it's a 13 point per 100 point differential, which would take you from like the 3rd to the 30th ranked team in the NBA. So when Gobert's on the floor, we allow 101.4 points per 100 possessions. When he's off the floor, we allow 114.5. Teams shoot 7 percentage points higher when Gobert's off the floor, 50 to 43. And per 48 minutes, we allow 107 points rather than allowing 93. Awesome! Cornerstone piece of our defense we got with the 27th pick of the draft. Are you kidding me? That's incredible. Incredible. Restricted area. Andy Larson's tweeted out some stats. I have different ones. Andy's usually right, but these are from NBA, so I'm going to go with them. And I'm not. Only point I mentioned that not to really actually tip of the hat to Andy that I know I'm saying something differently than what he tweeted and didn't want to make it sound like I direct messaged him today. I didn't want to suddenly. Andy does Salt City Hoops. For those who don't know, he's a good dude. Restricted area. When Rudy's in the game, teams shoot 56.6%. When he's out of the game, they shoot 66%. 10 percentage point difference. More importantly, they take 27% of their shots in the restricted area when Rudy's in the game, 32% of their shots when he's out. So 10 percentage points better when Rudy's out of the game and 5% more of their shots in the restricted area. Enormous. Great. Huge. Fabulous. Okay. Magic. Quinn says no magic pill. You're right. Because we can't score with him on the floor yet. Okay, we just can't do it yet. We shoot 5.5% percentage points less well when he's on the floor. Our threes go down 5 percentage points, and we go from scoring 107 points to scoring 98.6. 106.5 to 98.6. Okay, so suddenly we lose 8 points on the offensive end. Frankly, it's a win, right? We're better with Rudy on the floor, but he plays second-tier guys some of the time, so that's part of it. Last night he didn't play second-tier guys, other than he didn't have DeMarcus. So it's pretty close to second-tier guys. There's still some foul trouble and some other things. There's still a huge another step. Like what here? Let me make sure we're not getting too far ahead of ourselves, because it takes some time. What Rudy is showing is that for the first time in his NBA career, as a rotation player, he can impact games and impact them dramatically. That's awesome. It's not showing he's a starter. It's not showing he can do this as a starter. It's not showing he can hold the physical burden of a starter in his second year in the NBA when he's not strong enough. It's not showing that he's ready to play 35 minutes a night. It's not. That's the next steps. Don't get too far ahead of the train. You end up on the tracks and the train hits you from behind. Okay? It's part of the process. A little bit to the point of Derek Favors looked like an incredible defensive impactful player when playing off the bench against second-tier guys instead of Al Jefferson. Remember that? He's not. He's a great defensive player. He does not impact the rim at all. I got 2 years of data at this point. I got to concede. At 6'10", he's not a rim protector. Okay? Here's some good news. Little pieces of progress. Last 10 games, offense with Rudy Gobert on the floor, 101 points per 100 possessions, 101. Off the floor, 102. Oh, look at that. Look at that. Instead of being disastrously bad when Rudy's on the floor, over the last 10 games offensively, we've kind of begun to even it out. How about the defense? Brilliant. Brilliant. 93 points per 100 possessions when Rudy's on the floor, 118 when he's on the bench. Awesome. Earlier this year, by the way, we were worse defensively when Rudy was on the floor. Little pieces of progress. First 10 games of the year when Rudy was on the floor, we were just dang awful when he was on the floor. Second 10 games, we've been terrific. That's the story of this season, guys. Is it as much fun as pumping out your chest after a win against Cleveland? No. Did we all get out of whack, including myself, that when we went to that Chicago game, think if we won that Chicago game, we could be at 500 at some point? Yep. I did too. Has this team mentally worn down, physically worn down for the amount of stuff they're trying to put in and understand in Quinn's new system and all the things that are going to be beneficial down the road that are right now, and it's making them not perform at their peak? Yep. Little victories. Little victories along the way. And some little victories are big victories. This is one of them. Truly, this is one of them. We've played 21 games this year. Maybe a little thing, but Rudy's shooting percentage, 54% in the first 10, 62 in the second 10. And shooting more. All right. 15 minutes to start the year. Can he get up 25? Maybe. By the end of the year, can he play 20? Our defensive rating with Rudy Gobert for the first 10 games of the season, 108.7. For the second 10 games of the year, 95.9. And last night, 89.9. Okay? How about our offensive rating? Plus was 96.5, now 101. Little victories. That's a big one. Rudy's a big one. So now what do you do? The question obviously is, what do you do? You don't bench Enes Kanter. He's making progress. He's having little victories. His defense is getting better. He is rotating better. He is understanding better. He is evolving offensively. He is trying to pass. He is doing things. He's really working on it. His passion level is, as we saw with the mouthpiece flying, is at a higher level. His engagement level is at a higher level than it has been before. If you put Rudy Gobert in the starting lineup, you lose all of that. All of it. Can't do it. Not sure it's being. I'm sure it's discussed because the makeup of Quinn and his staff is that they work incredibly hard and they discuss everything. Okay. But you can't do it. Now at the 6-minute mark of the first quarter, could you bring Rudy Gobert in for Enes Kanter and try to play Derek and Rudy together for the next 6 minutes or a portion of that? Possibly. It'd be a big switch, but you could try it. Leave Hayward on the floor so you can hopefully score a little bit, and probably have to leave Trey on the floor now because you can't have Exum and Gobert and Favors on the floor together at the same time because nobody can shoot. Maybe bring in Rodney Hood with that and try to stretch the floor a little bit out of the shooting there. Maybe. Discussion worthwhile. What do you do next, though? Do you bring... So then Gobert plays those 6 minutes. What's your next sub in the front court? You bringing Kanter back in? When are you going to Booker? How are you doing this? Walking through it gets very complicated. You cannot end up... Probably do not want to end up with Enes Kanter and Trevor Booker on the floor together. I'm guessing that's not a great playing pair for us. It's not easy. Last night, I'm guessing, because I had the same reaction, why the heck isn't Rudy playing the fourth quarter? Because Favors is. Yeah, but no, not yeah, but anything, really. Like, that's it. Because Favors is. And as of right now, those two haven't spent enough time on the floor together or figured out how to work together. Does it need to happen? Yeah. Do we need to try to figure out how to do it? Yeah. Is it going to work? Honestly, maybe not. Maybe not. So what's the long-term answer you're asking? Well, we got a lot of time to figure that out. But instinctually, it's some sort of stretch for Ryan Anderson type of some sort. At least that's what it seems. Or does Ennis develop into that? Maybe, which is why you don't bench Ennis. I mean, you could go decide to play, if you want to try to get Rudy up to 25 minutes a night, and you're playing Favors, you're playing Favors 33, 34 if he's healthy, and you're playing Ennis 25, and you can get Gobert up to 25 out of your 96 minutes. I'm doing lot math on the air live, which is, you now have 13 minutes a night for Trevor Booker. Might be fine. But just make sure you realize that that's what just happened. I actually haven't looked to see what the Enes Kanter Trevor Booker combo is. I just assume it's not good. I could pull it up right now. So, all right, I'll pull it up here in a second while I'm answering questions. I will try to do all sorts of fun little data text to columns, little thingy here and see if I can get it done. But let's go to the questions, and then I'll come back and see if I can find that answer for you along the way. And I'm probably going to be able to. Do I have nope? Oh, I have lots of questions. Philip Malone, my man from Australia. I like the idea of Enes at the start of the second quarter with Rudy. Can the team afford to play different and slow with Enes in the post and allow a second unit score? Okay, sounds good, but you put the ball in the post to Enes. Where are you putting Rudy on the floor? Where is he? What's he doing? If he's standing 18 feet, they're not guarding him. Now Enes has no room to work. And Enes is not a good enough passer at this point in his career to take advantage of a double team. You got to have big men that can pass. We don't. That's a huge issue. It was last year I started on this thing. It's still a big issue. Right? I've got it ready. Let's go look at it. Let's take a quick second and here. I will share. We will work together. This is a long one today, isn't it? Are you bored yet? Are you wondering what is wrong with this guy? You know what? Kenyan coffee, really good. Really good today. All right, is this the right thing? It is. Let me blow it up a little bit for you so you can see it. If you are listening if you're watching, I will try to be very loving and caring and make sure it makes some sense for you. All right, so let's take a second. We are looking for Trevor Booker, not for Jazz. Jazz big men combinations here. And so we filter out a bunch of names. That's what we're doing if you're listening to the podcast on our playing pairs. And we should have our playing pairs. Okay, Derek Favors and Rudy Gobert have played 8 minutes together, and the defensive rating is 76.4. Stop the presses! Quinn Snyder! What, Quinn? It's 8 minutes? Oh, yeah. Is it worth trying? Absolutely. Are all of theirs not? Here's the problem, guys. And this is only 41 minutes, but here's the problem. This is what I suspected. If you go and start playing Rudy and Derek together, by definition a little bit, unless you get really creative with your rotation, it gets hard to do, and someone could try to figure it out. You end up having Trevor and Enes on the floor together, and that equally seems to not going to work. Now, it's only played 41 minutes together, but a lot of that is just trying to avoid it. And one of the reasons you're trying to avoid it because I don't think he can defend anyone. And so therefore, the fact that it has a 125.2 defensive rating in 41 minutes makes me believe that's probably true. The only lineup that's not working defensively is Derek Favors and Enes Kanter. I'm so tempted right now to say something, and I'm just going to bite my tongue. Because being petty and vindictive with loyal people that listen every day who I love very much and care for does not do me any good. But damn, it is tempting right now. For those of you who have been worth staying with me for 34 minutes, come on, you got to be having a little internal chuckle right now. It's funny what people will demand and then won't admit later. That's the issue, boys and girls. Favors and Kanter together, 117.7. That is god-awful. Trevor Booker and Rudy Gobert together is pretty good defensively, can't score. Playing second-tier guys. Trevor Booker and Derek Favors together, not so good defensively, but not terrible, but not so good. League average is 103.7, can't score. Rudy Gobert and Enes Kanter together, better defensively, Rudy factor, can't score. Maybe we can't. Oh, wait. Derek and Enes can score, can't defend. What? How does this work? This is the. We have puzzle pieces, and we haven't figured out how they all work together yet. This is pretty interesting stuff, actually. Pretty interesting stuff. All right, back to the questions. Philip Lowe, just wanted to agree with your tweet. Yesterday's postcast was brilliant. I wanted to thank you and Ron for the extra effort you put in to provide fans. Thank you. Ron was really good last night. That's why that was really good. It's worth listening. Jonathan Thatcher, Larry Sanders has the same measurables as Favors, yet seems to impact the game more defensively. I don't buy the narrative that Favors cannot be a rim protector. Lay this on the feet of the coaches, the defense scheme. I don't think they do have the same measurables. Do they really? That's interesting. Okay. I don't know how you're putting that on the coaches when it's back-to-back coaches who are playing him in different schemes and have altered it. I think he's a fabulous defensive player, but I think you can be a really good defensive player without being a rim protector in the same fashion. And for whatever reason, Derek does not seem to impact the rim. Maybe I'm going to turn out to be dead wrong on this, and I don't have enough data, and I'm making an assumption. Maybe I'm making an assumption. Derek is 6'8" and 3/4 without shoes. His wingspan is 7'4", and his reach is 9'2". Okay. Larry Sanders will be our next contestant on what are your measurables. Larry Sanders is 6'9" and 1/4", so he's half an inch taller. His wingspan is 7'6.5", so it's 2.5 inches bigger, and his standing reach is 9'4". Nothing comparable at all. Come on now, be better than that. Those aren't the same at all. That's why. Sorry, Jonathan. Dax. 2 questions. First, it seems like our D really suffers at the top of the key. Burke's not really doing it. Thoughts? Second, I would love to see Ersan Ilyasova come over from Milwaukee. I think he'd be ideal in Quinn's system. A stretch 4 would be fabulous. Ersan Ilyasova is an interesting player because he had a bad year last year, and you might have been able to get him on the cheap, but they weren't willing to move him because he was so cheap, and they knew he was better than that, so I don't know what they would do now. He would be good. You'd have to remove some, but you know what? Okay, so Ennis is really getting a lot better and still progressing nicely. And for the point of this conversation, I'll just do this, but I don't mean this necessarily as the exchange. But an Ersan Ilyasova type with Favors and Gobert is the logical answer to how you work a big man rotation with Gobert and Favors, and you have periods of time in the game where you have a hard time scoring because you're going to defend. And then as the game goes on, you, depending on your matchup, you use a stretch 4 like Ilyasova. So yes. Yes. That's very accurate. Since I just buried him, I'll give him another chance. Jonathan, we constantly talk about youth being the main culprit of this team being poor defensively, but then how do you explain Milwaukee's defensive improvement? What about Phoenix's defensive improvement last year? Jonathan, I'm going to bury you twice today. I mean, first of all, there's 2 aspects to this. And I'm not, you know what? Let me back off for a second. Good question. Really good question. And I appreciate you asking it because that's what everyone's wondering. Nobody, and I held a meeting actually at the office the other day with a bunch of the staff about what's going on with the team. And I asked, none of them wanted to be honest like you, Jonathan. I asked how many of them, when they hear coaches talk about the youth and young teams and and that kind of stuff, think it's total hogwash. And they wouldn't raise their hand. But you know what? Until like 3 or 4 years ago, I totally thought it was hogwash. And then I began to see it and understand it. So it's a great question. let's look at some of your reference points. Phoenix, one of the key things to Phoenix last year that everybody seemed to miss, and I talked about it a lot last year, but it just never, at least in my mind, gained traction, was that almost everybody on that team was doing something they'd already done before. Almost everyone. Other than Bledsoe and Plumlee, if you look at last year's primary Phoenix team that went, had that big increase, they had guys that had all played before. Defensively, by the way, they didn't get that much better last year. They went from 108.1 to 106.7. It's an improvement, but it's an improvement that's probably solely based on the fact that they improved 8 points per 100 possessions offensively. And what I mean by that is by simply making teams take the ball out of the net, you get better defensively. But if you look at that Phoenix team last year, Goran Dragic had spent multiple years as a starting point guard in the NBA and done that before. PJ Tucker had been a starting small forward the year before. The Morris twins had come off the bench in their roles before. Only Bledsoe and Plumlee were doing things that are brand new. We've only got three and a half guys on this team who've ever done what they're being asked to do before. Okay, Milwaukee, you ask. Milwaukee's got some young pieces, but they also have a pretty good rim defender in Larry Sanders, who's 26 years old, experienced, and defends the rim well, with a bench of what I would consider relative veterans at this point. Jared Dudley, 29, Zaza Pachulia, 30, Ersan Ilyasova, 27, Jared Bayless, 26 years old and been in the league for 6 years. Brandon Knight is 23, has been starting point guard for 4 years. And Milwaukee's made a nice defensive jump this year. Milwaukee has gone from a terribly injury-riddled, awful team to 10th best in the league defensively. So it's a great question. But let's back up a step. And let's give a little bit of a cultural thing too. Scott Skiles was their head coach before. The year before, they were 38 and 44, and they were pretty good defensively. And guess what? Their defensive rating right now is exactly the same as it was the 2 years prior to last year when they had all their injuries. So I'm not sure that I really think that they may have made as big a jump defensively as we think. But what we do have is that last year Larry Sanders played 25 games. And last year they had Chris Middleton starting, and they started Giannis Antetokounmpo at 19 years old and John Henson at 22 years old. And they had no player, I think, other than Brandon Knight and Chris Middleton start over 25 games or something crazy with the amount of injuries they had last year. And they quit. So they were the worst defensive team in the league last year. They've jumped to 10th best at 105, but they were 105 for the 2 years prior with pretty much the same system. So I'm not sure that I buy their defensive improvement is some quantum switch with younger players. It's really the premise that Scott Skiles built in this team with Larry Sanders in the middle, who's back. He's a good rim defender. Good answer? Bad answer? I don't know. You tell me. Thank you for the question. I do appreciate it. All right, final question. We're like 40 minutes today. To me, Rudy is playing well, but I notice Quinn yelling at him in every game, and I don't see him doing it much to other players. Is Quinn pressing too much Rudy, or did he just not sit well on the floor? So he gets on Ennis and Rudy and Alec and Gordon and everybody, and we have to be very – it's a good question. We have to be very careful to not decide that that's the story of the night. That's the story of a singular possession. Rudy has a weakness that he has a tendency to not leave his man defensively. ever. That drives Quinn bananas. So you got to play team defense. Your guys have got to be able to do things at the top knowing that Rudy's going to help, particularly if he's Rudy. That's what Quinn's trying to instill in him. Does it mean he had a bad night? No, it means he had a bad possession. And Quinn's teaching. Same way he did with Ennis yesterday. Taught him, took him out, put him back in. But don't let that tell you that that's the whole night story. That's a long one. Hope you're good. You know what? I appreciate you really tuning in. A lot of people have jumped off the ship. You're still with us. And if you're here for 45 minutes, you're crazy. And I love crazy passion. Because you know why? Caffeinated and crazy, baby! I'm out of coffee. The show must be over.